Welcome to Teaching Truth. For 18 months, Dean Marks, who oversaw the restoration of the crumbling and dilapidated St Martin's Church in Tipton in the West Midlands, made himself available. In all that time, he only had Christmas Day off. To engage in any grand design building project such as Dean did, overseeing the restoration of that dilapidated building into a lovely family home, he had to make and did make himself available. And as we come today to our final reflection in looking at the responses of Nehemiah as we find them in Nehemiah chapter 1, to the broken walls of Jerusalem and to the challenge of rebuilding a nation, we want simply to consider the fact that Nehemiah made himself available. Nehemiah, cupbearer to the king. Nehemiah, visionary leader. Nehemiah, clerk of works, was the same Nehemiah who got his hands dirty, who worked with the men and engaged the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. Nehemiah made himself available, and therein lies the challenge to us. Remember, Nehemiah is 800 miles away from home when he hears the news of the broken walls, and yet he makes himself available in that moment to be used by God in helping to rebuild the walls. He doesn't say it's beyond him, he doesn't delegate it to others. He makes that conscious decision to be involved in wall building. Let me ask you the question as I ask it firstly of myself. Are you available for wall building spiritually? Are you willing to be used by God to rebuild perhaps some broken walls? To build God's kingdom in this our day and generation. You see, God can and God wants and God will, on the basis of his promises, use you whether you be 18 or 88. God can use you as he did Nehemiah if we make ourselves available to him. God is calling for availability. All of us have one life to live with all the talents and gifts the Lord has equipped us with. What tools are you putting at God's disposal? Are you up for wall building spiritually? Are you available? I want to close our reflections this week by sharing a story with you. It's a true story. And I don't want it to be a sentimental story, but it vividly and so personally illustrates how God can use someone who is simply available. Over 40 years ago, there was a man by the name of Ian. Ian was a Sunday school teacher, a man who had his physical limitations, one whom many because of that had little time for. But despite that, one who faithfully served God in the little Sunday school class that he had. And today, years later, as a result of Ian being available and faithful, God has honoured and blessed him. Because there are young men and women who, through his Sunday school class, became Christians and are now serving the Lord. Why do I know that? Well, quite simply, because I happen to be one of those young men. Ian McCulloch from Carluke Baptist Church was my Sunday school teacher, a humble man of God, if ever there was one. A faithful servant, if ever there was one. and one who made himself available. And as a result of that availability, God used him. Friends, if God used and is still using Ian with all his limitations to encourage others, what makes you think that you cannot be used by God to touch and to impact and to make a difference in the lives of others? What makes you think that you cannot be used by God to engage in some wall building? What makes you think that your tool set, your skill set, isn't something that God can use? God wants you to be available, to get your hands dirty, to be involved in building for time and for eternity. Ian made himself available. Ian was faithful. And friends, if we are faithful in sowing, then who knows where that seed might fall. When we make ourselves available, there is no end to what God might do. Nehemiah was a man who made himself available, and look at what God did through his life in enabling him to oversee the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem and the rebuilding of a nation. Today, may our response be that of the song, "Here I am, wholly available. As for me, I will serve the Lord."